what that is? Discipline. Selfish.
No joke. We're legitimate.
Fucking do that? Then do it. Do it 100%, because I'm trying to.
We recognize that we are limitless.
You gotta be a champion to become a champion, right? Winning is a habit because we create habits that lead to good execution and success.
Hey, happy National Holiday Day. It's Monday and time for the Coaches Show, the podcast where we break down the game inside the game, mindset, the strategies, the leadership that drive championship paintball. I'm Mike Bianca, coach of San Diego Dynasty, and with me is my friend and co-host, Coach Ryan Gray of Red Legion. Tonight's show should be a good one. It is episode 89, and we have an exciting guest joining us tonight, one whom we have every intention of picking his brain to the fullest, and for our watchers and listeners. Now, listen, this is episode, let's see, that's what I was going to say. We've got Coach Dusty Cort of Seattle Uprising. This team is coming off a third place finish at the NXL Lone Star event and has been on the upward trend for some time now. And we're going to delve into the methods and processes that this team has used to shift the paradigm and become such a dangerous and unpredictable opponent in the Pro X-Ball League. All right. This episode is brought to you by Maxt Sportswear. Get with Charles for 2026 deals and sponsorship information. BKI, where the smart players are getting smarter. Go to BKI. All right. Hey, also don't forget, on a personal note, hit the GoFundMe for Dylan Rizzardo of Royal City Sea Dogs. All right. One of our own needs some help, and we need to help him. Anything helps in the fight for this young man. So check out the GoFundMe link that I'm pretty sure Ryan's going to throw up there here any minute. All right, Ryan, we got Dusty here, and I kind of want to hop in because you and I have been talking about this, and this is something that I've been talking with my own crew for some time. As coaches, everything we do is an experiment, right? We're mad scientists out there. We all use different methods, but we all ultimately use a similar process, right? The end result, the end goal. So you got hypothesis, and then you got theory. And for some of you who may have not opened a book in some time, here's a reminder, right? A hypothesis is a tentative thought process that can be tested through experimentation. There's that word again. Practice needs, player development, game planning, in-game adaptations and adjustments. They all fall within this definition. Then there's theory. Now, theory is a well-substantiated explanation based on a body of evidence that's been repeatedly tested, right? We think the field will play this way. We think this is the setup that will see the highest probability of success, etc. So let's get into tonight. I can't wait to talk about this type of thought process with you and our guest. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is episode 89.
Oh, yes.
Supposed to do that, but yeah, this is episode 89. I know as you and I were kind of talking through staffing, right? There's also a lot of experimentation in sort of what the hierarchy of your team is going to look like from a staffing perspective. Putting, as Joey Blue would say, aces in their places, trying to find the right place to plug and play guys, not just from a player perspective, but also staffing. You want to have a coaching staff that is built out where people's talents are being utilized correctly, right? And that's always, especially, for you and I both this year coming into new groups, that's an experiment, right? We're going to test this for a little bit. We're going to test this for a little bit. We're going to test this for a little bit. And then based on our results, we'll know kind of where everybody's supposed to be. So, yeah, there's a lot of experimentation going on. You named just a large number there. There's also experimentation when it comes to how we're going to address players. How are we going to communicate with one another, right? There's just always these little tests that we're kind of running outside of really those kind of tangible things that we talk about from a play perspective when we think about tournament preparation and a layout and those kind of things. There's those intangible pieces that we're also testing, right? How we're going to connect with each player to get buy-in, right?
Perfect.
And sometimes it's not even about buy-in as much as it is just finding that connection with that player so that they'll trust you, right? They'll trust the things that you're saying because you've developed that personal relationship. So I know as you and I were talking about this, Dusty came to my mind almost immediately simply because of what we've seen over the last, it's been, I think, a year and an event now that we've seen kind of this new evolution, if you will, of Uprising. Mm-hmm. That it's not the same Uprising that we saw over the last 3 to 4 seasons where they're making these kind of critical errors in these big moments in matches where they're losing by 1 or 2 points to top level teams on a pretty consistent basis. They're in all of those matches, but losing by 1 or 2 points. Now we're seeing Seattle Uprising as a more disciplined, more oiled kind of molded sort of machine, right? That is playing with more purpose. So Dusty, I thought of him almost immediately as we were talking about this, just again, because of what we've experienced with sort of this new evolution of Uprising that continues to be on this upward trend. So let's bring Dusty in and talk about it.
Yeah. Welcome, Dusty.
Hey, guys. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you, man. Ryan made some great comments there. I love the fact that you used the word evolution. We're using a couple of E words tonight, right? So evolution. And Dusty, I kind of want to pick your brain about this, but I want to start off by maybe sharing a little bit about, and Ryan, I want you to share a little bit about this as well. And then we'll unleash Dusty on it. So, we've used the term, this whole season with Dynasty has been an experiment, right? So far, new coaching, new players, new ideas introduced into an ecosystem with a history of success, right? As a team, we're constantly evolving, trying to find what works with the latest elements of players and coaches, right? We saw some success at the beginning of the year as we integrated systems, but we had a large hiccup this last event, right? Obviously, Uprising had the opposite. This, of course, is, that hiccup spurred or triggered our inner systems, right? To find the fix. Data only gets you so far. You have to implement and execute processes that create and deliver a positive learning curve, so to speak, right? One thing is for sure, you can't have a flat line. You have to evolve. It's the definition of insanity in action. And you're certainly won't see any success or maintain your place in the pro division if your line is trending down, right? So Dynasty as a team is always looking for methods to keep us ahead. And that is adaptation, right? Heading into Cup, we're trying some new processes and procedures to produce better results. It's nothing radical. Doesn't have to be, by the way, coaches, but something has to be done. A team that's okay with status quo will eventually falter. I'm sure, Ryan, you've done similar things with Legion. And Dusty, that's kind of what I want to start off tonight with is and kind of get both of y'all, Ryan, and I know I'm kind of ambushing you a little bit, Ryan, Dusty, but get y'all's kind of insight into that as well.
Yeah, Dusty, you can start.
Perfect. I think a lot of it for us is more based on the concept that we have these like adapting methodologies that we know that work and things that we've kind of set into place that has really kind of shifted. I don't want to say drastically, but it's been slowly changing. So now we have a big variation in how we do things based on, 1 week at a time or however, often we kind of have been making those adjustments. And I think the big thing is it's just like refining and getting to a point where we like are using our bandwidth correctly and then being able to kind of audit those process, which like, I know for me, when it comes to process, it's like kind of simplify them, audit them, and then manage them, right? And making sure they're getting used properly. And that gives us a chance to kind of continually improve and always be looking for like the next edge or the thing that puts us ahead. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I love it. Ryan?
Like, my particularly like my role has changed, like 3 times since I've been with Red Legion. Like, and so has some of the other coaches, right? Like we've kind of swapped roles at events and again, just kind of testing, like, does it work better if we do it this way? Does it work better if we try it this way? Does, when should we have this conversation? I kind of mentioned to Mike this morning when we were talking about this show, had a really good conversation with Kirill the last time I was in Tampa, the last night. And one of the things we talked about is like some added information to the players after coach gives them the play. There was some information that wasn't shared with them. And again, sometimes I don't know because they're speaking in Russian. So, Lexi's giving them the play and then direction in Russian. And I don't know if he's shared with them what I've told him. Right. And so Kirill was just like, hey, if it's really critical, you just need to grab me or whoever needs that information and tell them. And I'm like, that's great. That's great feedback. And, I'll make sure that it happens. But so it's funny too. Like sometimes when you're in a certain role, that place you're in is still also evolving, right? Like though that may be the thing that you're supposed to do, things will pop up that have to be handled and managed. And, so you have to constantly be sort of malleable and pliable to the new things that are coming your way because there's going to be a lot. So, I think it's important that you understand that your role is going to be constantly evolving. Unless you're a single coach trying to do a whole job, more than likely, if you're a part of a staff, which all of us are, your role changes, right? Like depending on what the need is, your role just kind of changes. So. Yeah,
it's imperative. And by the way, Ryan, one last comment. Whether they're speaking Russian or not, it doesn't. They don't have to be speaking right. Some people can be speaking English and they don't fully understand, right? So
totally.
We were talking about that in the green room, right? We have to. Part of building that relationship and understanding how players learn, right? So we have to understand how to speak to each player, and then you've got to learn another language for the entire team, right? There's that warrior
Russian
that we talk about, right? Yeah. Russian. So, but
Well, I think to add to that I would really want to emphasize is to add to what you're saying, Mike, is like being able to establish a common language and like working with people enough where they know exactly what you mean. Specifically when it comes to paintball, and the lingo can be kind of varied. Your camp versus my camp, East Coasters versus West Coasters. Being able to, one of the examples I'll give is like Jonah Rodriguez, who's been playing with us. He's from New York, kind of from a whole different culture. And essentially us being able to make sure that we can establish like what we actually mean when we're telling him things, him asking good questions if he doesn't fully understand, those kinds of things is what actually leads to more success, and not kind of having that misunderstanding that you're constantly trying to redefine and correct.
Outstanding. And that's a very real thing, right? We talk about culture as a team, but a lot of times you're having to meld different worlds, and that culture can be a hodgepodge of different things. And I think the East Coast, West Coast thing is a legitimate thing. The Southern thing is certainly something different that some people don't fully understand or grasp sometimes. But something you said there, the success, chasing successes, right? Taking data, making adjustments for teams, whether it be from communication, or processes or training or drills, what have you. And that's something I want to get into with you because of your staff, right? I think you have a great staff. We've had some of your co-coaches on this show before, taking the data, making the adjustments for the team. What did we do well? Why did we do it well? How do we maintain it? Then what did we not do well? Why did we not do that well? And how do we address it? So let's kind of jump into that process for you and your crew, and kind of give us an idea of what that's like.
So first I'm going to mention Tyler Mashad, who's like pretty much our head coach, head coordinator, I guess, would probably be the best way to put it. And then there's Lucas Sylvester, who does stats and data, and is essentially a coach that I would say that we're developing. He's a great guy. He does a really good job of, staying in tune with paintball and basically managing stats. But also I know Tyler and I are both always trying to push more responsibility on him because we want to help him grow into someone who can kind of lead the ship at some point. For myself, I'm generally, I'm around more day to day, right? The guys play at the park that I'm at all the time. So I'm around the guys a lot more often. When it comes to actual tournaments and practice, I think a lot of my role is going to be to help kind of catch the meta and then kind of reinforce our situational paintball to make sure people understand situations and how we want to play all those things. And then at actual tournaments, I kind of play the in-between between the pits and the rest of the world, right? So whether it's dealing with Jason or the league, or, you know, watching the games as they're happening and kind of doing some of the planning and like having some input with all of the whole process, I more kind of play the in-between where I'm not actually in the pits the whole time until we, you know, need to discuss things or need to, you know, have some higher level theory conversations like mid-game to make sure we know how we want to play situations. So I think that's kind of the structure at which we use. And like with that, I know I'd probably say the biggest like process difference that we've had is going to all at home layout practices. At times we probably will try to travel again and like play other pro teams more for the newer guys to get that exposure. But essentially when it comes down to having kind of unlimited access, my brother Danny and like obviously the guys at the park, like allowing us to kind of do what we want to on layout weekends, and even really only playing with ourselves where we can get perfect data all the time, right? We can kind of set our situations, make sure that we kind of have the setups we want to see against each other, and then kind of fully talk through everything and get great data. Like that's probably one of the biggest differences for us in the last year or so when it comes to getting better outcomes.
Yeah, so you kind of you went down a good path there, and I love it. You said a lot of stuff I want to touch on in just a moment. So let's talk about your history really quick, because you said, hey, as of late. So let's talk about the team's history. Mm-hmm. This is Seattle Uprising's 10th professional season. Since the inception of the team, you guys have really kind of hovered around the bottom of the pack. You were 13th place, 10th place when there were 16 teams, then 13th when they added the bottom teams. And then in 2019, you guys were in the top 10 with and highest placing was a 4th place finish. Still no podium finishes at that point. Then we go through the COVID season, which I'm going to skip because that's silly. But then you guys finished 16th, 12th, 16th, 14th. And now you guys have found your way back into the top 10 and have your first podium finish as a professional team. So not only like did you guys are things as of late going differently, but I don't necessarily think it's just the way we're seeing the scores, but I know from talking to other teams, scouting you guys myself, there's some concern around playing Uprising. Right. Whereas before you kind of felt really, really confident going into that game. Now there's some concern, right? Like teams understand that you guys are no longer the team of old. You're much more disciplined, much different. So there's more than just you guys playing yourselves and getting really good data. There's a lot more going on there. So let's kind of dig into some of that. So you mentioned those two things. A couple of other words you said earlier, which I love. You talked about bandwidth and finding out what that bandwidth is and auditing, right? And I love that, right? And again, it fits right into the experimentation. So we have this hypothesis. Now we're going to go test our hypothesis to determine whether or not we can make this hypothesis theory, right? Is this something that has high probability? So you guys have done a lot more than just practice at home. Right. A lot more. So kind of talk us through some of the changes that you guys sort of made right away. And we talked a little bit about this with Tyler, and I think even you the last time you were on. Talk about some of the things you guys that you changed kind of immediately, and then now what are the things that we're working on the evolution of?
Yeah, I think like the immediate changes obviously has to do with like Jimmy Hickey taking over as owner. Kind of giving us a clear top-down structure that hasn't always existed. Essentially, you know, going to bring me on, and which led to Tyler coming on also. And I will say that like I want to give Tyler as much credit as possible because he's a brilliant dude when it comes to paintball, and has really kind of given us that big brother level of leadership. Where again, it's not necessarily Tyler telling everyone what to do; it's just guiding the conversations and making sure that the guys have the best chance they can to bring it to life, right? As far as what we want to do and how we want to play things. So I think that is kind of the first, you know, main difference is having, you know, leadership and guidance and taking a lot off of the players' plates and these guys not having to quite do as much. And then really for a group of guys like us, it's kind of everybody doing as much as they can. And that's going to vary the capacity at which people have to put into it. And another obvious big part of that is like Nate coming back. And essentially Nate is at his core a project manager and essentially, you know, helps kind of manage all the processes and really does a good job of trying to help and implement more stuff and kind of leading the way directly with the players in that process. So I think that's kind of the first part of it. It's like the restructuring, getting the right people that have the right vision to kind of help everybody stay going in the right direction. So I would start with that point. And then essentially, like, once we kind of got that going and have all the right people, it just becomes like all of us finding clarity on what is actually important, right? Like, what is the most important stuff for us to figure out? What are the most important things for us to talk about? We're getting to a point where, like, we know we don't want people talking in the pit the whole time. We don't need to be having all these side conversations. We need to make sure that, the airways are clear for the most important things to be able to be emphasized in situations to kind of be dynamically discussed and adjusted to on the fly. Because obviously things are going to come up that, you weren't prepared for, but you want to be prepared for as it happens and things like that. So I think that's where the bandwidth conversation comes into. And that really, a lot of that kind of comes from Nate and his understanding of kind of clearing space for everybody to, kind of discuss the most important things. So
that's
you
great.
said something interesting there earlier, and it's something I wanted to jump on. You beat me to it, Ryan. You got the 2 of my 3 things I want to jump on. One of the things you also said was, it was slowly coming around, right? You had noticed, and it sounds like you had these dominoes fall, and as the different pieces came into place, it sped that process up. So, like, Nate coming back, being a project manager, obviously he's bringing experiences from other teams that he's played with, and he's brought those processes back. Now you've got more of a structure, right? You've built this structure with the team, from the coaching staff to how you're doing practices to all these things. So you're focusing obviously on strengths as well as weaknesses. And you can really do that. You can really break that down when it's just yourself practicing each other, because then your data on all 10 players or 12 players or how many it is, you've got very clean data from that perspective. And I was just curious, what do you think it's just that Uprising, obviously you guys are located in in a place that you probably can't practice year round, right? With a weather issue. And so the time together is that much more vitally important. Were there ways of you creating efficiencies once you had all the pieces into place where you all just sat down and said, you know what, this is really what we need to be emphasizing, and this is why we need to be emphasizing this?
Yeah, I think there's a few points to that. The first one is we've done a better job of, like, just capturing our data and plans and being dynamic with it. And in the context of, like, just making sure we're taking everybody's input and then kind of logging it as we go, and using some visual guides is make sure that, like, what we're talking about is, like, clear and direct to everybody. And it's not just involving, like, the 1 or 2 guys that can think it through, or the 1 or 2 guys that, can handle the train of thought, like, in that moment. So I think that's a big part of that is, not only capturing the data, it's being able to take the data, put it into theory, and then kind of share the message with everybody. And again, there's different levels at which guys can, process that and how much information they can handle. A couple of our guys are going to know everything about everything. A couple of the guys are going to be more focused on what their main things are, and then the really nuance of information that is important to them. So I think that is kind of the first part of that question.
Right. Excellent. Okay.
So kind of digging, you said finding clarity. How do you guys find the clarity? Because now you're kind of touching on some data stuff. So let's talk about clarity. How do we find that?
I think the first process is it's workshopping things on the field at times, right? It's taking and saying, hey, we think we can do this. And then, to be fair, like with the way NXL fields are templated out, like a lot of times we have previous data or previous layouts or previous things like, hey, this is gridded out the exact same, and we know that this is super shootable. We got Holly back there shooting all these break shots and doing a really good job of shooting people and going, hey, we kind of know in this situation with that brick on the 50, we've seen this before. What routes can we shoot? What routes can't we shoot? And then just workshopping them to the point where, hey, we know it can work. And then, of course, putting the right guys to shoot the shot and the right guys that are fast enough to, make it difficult so we can actually simulate playing other pro teams who have players with elite traits and characteristics that, we kind of have to plan for. So.
Mm-hmm. And so once you guys have found, like, so you've gotten your theory, now you have an understanding of sort of what you do well, what you don't do well. Now, how are you, like, maintaining the things that you guys do well and then continuing to create progression in the things that you don't?
I think the big part about it is one, obviously staying on top of your day-to-day drills and things that like keep you sharp, right? Like we still, we're a good break shooting team, but it's because we still work on it all the time, right? We never stop working on the basic fundamentals that kind of give us an edge. And then I think the next part about that is, other than doing kind of skill work consistently, it's refining our train of thought and our like process about playing paintball. And earlier, I kind of mentioned the concept of like, at times we're actually playing a completely different game depending on the layout. Sometimes we're playing Castles and Conquest in the game of territories. Sometimes we're playing a game that consists of like, the hunkering down and playing more of a defensive style. Other times it can be more zone trap base, attacking edges. And so being able to kind of clarify what version of paintball we're actually trying to play, and at times being adaptive with that if our theory ends up needing correction, and then pointing everything that we do towards that. It's kind of one of the ways that we keep making progress and kind of keep improving, is making sure that we're kind of keeping the clarity on that so that we can point our communication, our sequencing, all that stuff to that main thing. So
I love how simple you just said all of that. There's so many things in what you just said, and you said it in such a simple way.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was writing down actually, right? And you can sum it up by basically saying that, hey, we're going to clarify and focus on the way we want to play this layout, right? So adaptation, shifting gears. I talk about shifting gears. The team that can adapt and shift gears faster and quicker than other teams will always have the edge. And that sounds like exactly what you're talking about.
Well, and I think we're learning too as we go. There's a few like instances in my mind I can think from playing Red Legion the last event where, we're kind of chasing them, because I think it's some of your guys' templating and stuff that you do. So all of a sudden you're chasing players as you're scouting, and you're not necessarily as forward thinking as you'd hope to be. So I know even for us, like there's still improvements in those kind of situations. Or I mentioned in the green room where, we know what the best setup is on the last layout, and we kind of let ourselves get choked out by it by not essentially giving the players the right tools to kind of, make whatever come to life to get out of those situations, or at least to, kind of go for it. And then we can reset quicker instead of kind of getting stuck in some of these, situations that, they have our back, but they're just not quite squeezing you all the way because they don't need to, basically based on game situation. So we're still adapting and learning in that like sequence also.
I'm glad you brought the game with us up, because I was going to bring this up too. Do you think when you guys don't necessarily play another pro team because I do think the thing that got you guys off guard a little bit in that beginning of that match is we shot a lot of you guys off the break and I don't think that had happened to you yet.
I would say it matters, but we also do some stuff to account for that. I don't want to get into the, drills that we do. Because, some of them are a little bit more in-house stuff, but I do think that we do a really good job of making sure we've seen those situations, and it's not just, hey, we go there and get chopped up. I will also say about that match, like one of the things that I would like emphasize about it is, in our side of the story, like we kind of knew that we had to throw a couple perfect pitches, and if they worked out and we could, steal a couple games, like it's a match we can hang. And then, I was kind of joking with our guys in the pits, like you guys didn't really want to play us more either, based on the idea that, hitting the button, in some context, right? Because I think I value the idea that, we can kind of scheme people up and steal a few kills and take advantage of those situations, right? So I just think
was Kirill being real hot.
yeah. But again, I think even for you guys, it's untraditional to let that much time run off the clock and not want to play more points, right? So, from our side, it was, hey, we know we have to go throw 1 or 2 perfect pitches in the first few points. And if we can kind of nail those and stay in the game, then it's worth kind of going for it. And if we can't, it was our second match, your first match. We just already know the circumstance of like, hey, we think we can handle everything in front of us as long as this doesn't get out of hand, So
super smart. Yeah. Super smart.
I want to clarify something though, just for my own edification. And so you talked about, putting ourselves in situations and being prepared for specific scenarios. Let's use the impact. You said, but we hadn't given them the tools. So was in the impact match. So had we not worked through, that situation or that scenario? Have we not?
I think it was as simple as like the situation I'm talking about is them being in the big brick on the 40-yard or 50-yard line, trapping down the snake side with us having 4 guys alive, them having someone in two guys in the snake, 1 protecting the inside player, 1 guarding the tape, right? It's kind of that you're locked up. Like there's not a lot you can do out of that. kind of formation, right? And we talked about it happening and kind of talked about how we didn't want to move into their guns and talked about, a few of the situations that way, hey, how can we help our snake guy still get over there, or at least not kind of get put in that chokehold. I don't think we did a good enough job of helping the players build a template for how does the wide Dorito player shoot in the snake player so our insert Dorito player can get down the field and get that guy off the field, or do anything to kind of make that move. And then even in the same like train of thought, even if we can't make that move, just program the guys where, hey, we have to go for this because we have to lose this point anyway, right? So instead of us from the pits having to make that decision for them, it goes, hey, as long as you're not out there getting penalties or doing things that are going to cost us more later, then hey, we should probably go for this no matter what. And I know for some of our players that are getting a lot more playtime now and kind of getting into it, it's them kind of being empowered to make that decision, where I know for some of those guys, it's like, hey, they're still feeling it out, right? As first or second year pros, like they don't necessarily want to make that decision themselves and make a big mistake in that crucial moment. So
last question. Yeah. And again, I hope this doesn't come off as anything negative. Do you think practicing yourselves for that event, do you think perhaps if you had practiced another team, you might have seen that situation a little bit more and might have come up with a more programmed response?
Possibly. I mean, I also think it was one of those plays that I don't want to say everyone kind of saved, but we saw one of the pro teams do it on accident, I think, because they like came off it and weren't, super aware. So you kind of see it happening. Oh, wait a minute. They just had the best setup and didn't actually know it, and then we saw Justin actually do it against, I think, Aftermath at one point.
We ran it like to say 8 times probably.
Yeah. So, and just, I think part of it too is there was just different pacings with it, where the stuff that we kind of programmed was like, hey, how do we see this? And then essentially there were just instances where like we just didn't catch it, right? Because you have these small windows to look at if you're not looking at the right time. Yeah. And like at its base, paintball is a game of timing, right? Where it's like, are you looking at the right hole and shooting the right hole at the right time? So I think that was kind of some of the stuff where we just didn't quite go as far as we could have with that. And honestly, I take personal responsibility for it because I remember kind of seeing the setup happen a few different times of the tournament, like kind of nudging Tyler, like, hey, this is it, this is the winning setup once you kind of have the chokehold. And then again, just not like kind of re-emphasizing it enough to kind of talk through and go even farther. And our guys do a really great job of kind of having the positive and negative conversations based on that, right? Where it's like, hey, as we talk through it, like it seems like it's really good. What are the downsides? What are we missing? What's the farther version of the thought? Like Graham specifically is a really smart guy, and it's kind of always going to the next thing. Like, hey, do we have to stop here? Or do we have to go one layer farther to actually have this work? So I would say in general, yes, we probably could have, done a better job or saw it more, but it's not like we didn't play against it. We still, we played that bunker quite a bit. I just don't know if we had the right guys playing the spot to come off and have the conviction to say, hey, this is it, guys. Like, those kinds of things. If, Nate or one of the OG guys kind of plays that spot, they probably come off with a lot of conviction going, hey, this worked really well. We just have to combo it with this, and as coaches, like we need to do a better job of, kind of putting the right guys in those spots instead of just kind of running anybody through it who may or may not have the same input or the same conviction of theory. So
such a great point. I love the conviction of theory. I appreciate that. I certainly do. And you did something else there that, you said, hey, I take accountability for that. Right. And we were talking about this earlier about the human element, right? And accountability is part of that constant evolution. You have to be able to look at yourself and say, I can do that better. I should have done this better. And here's how I'm going to fix it. So I certainly appreciate everything you just said. That was really cool.
Yeah, and I love too that everything you're talking about right there is the experiment, right? It's like we didn't give it the right litmus test, right? Because we didn't maybe have the right guy run up there to play the spot and give us the right feedback that we needed to get appropriate data to move forward into the theory process. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
love that. So you guys saw, and I think they ran it first play, right? They ran that the very first play of the match. They ran Nick Laval right up to that brick. Yeah. He gets a kill pretty fast, and then I think he shot the next guy trying to feed in maybe, and then the third guy was able to launch from the back center and make it in. But when you guys recognize like, hey, this is a problem, is that something you guys tried to talk about right in the middle of the match, or is that something you just save for after the match? Hey, now in the future, we need to make sure we do X, Y, Z to figure this out.
In that match, we did talk about it. I think even before it happened, he didn't just run there off the break. He late filled it off of a read, I believe. Like, I think he saw that they had the trap on the snake side and then late filled it, because we actually had our center W guy programmed to watch the sliver to make sure that we knew if he was up there, and then we just didn't see it. So we kind of had it pre-set up where we knew that was an outcome that was possible, and we kind of had a guy in the right spot to see it. I'm not sure if they filled past his eyes on the Dorito side first, but there was definitely a delay in action that caused him to like not spot that, and then two guys to kind of get chopped up. I think we also talked about having the wherewithal of like, hey, if our guy gets shot on that under route, like unless it's the snake side can, which generally had a hard time shooting that guy after the break, then there's something that we didn't expect, right? Or there's something, the guys are kind of in that spot, which I think as, coaches, we could have done a better job giving the players that programming also. Like, hey, if Nate is shot on this under, there's a good chance if we don't know where the guy's at, he's in that bunker, just holding that trap because it is such a good spot. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Love it. So let's delve into a little bit. So I have this theory. Well, I don't. We were talking in the green room about standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And we all like to take aspects from our favorite coaches or things we've learned from other coaches over the years and apply it. Mine actually didn't come from paintball. It actually came from shooting real guns. But performance training versus outcome training. Are you familiar with the concept?
Yes.
Yeah. So performance goals focus on specific aspects of players and coaches, things they can control, improving technique or achieving personal best, that sort of thing. And then the outcome focus, right, is on a broader target. Like if I'm running a drill, I'm hitting the target 3 times in a row from a low knee snap or something during a drill, or maybe even it's winning a match. Right. They depend on external factors beyond the coach or player's control. So is this something that you implement a lot more from, not just at practice, but also at the events?
I think so. I also like Tyler leads the way on a lot of that stuff too. Like he, has an engineer mind, but I think it's also process and performance kind of go together, right? In the idea that, hey, once we kind of have our processes laid out, knowing that we're actually doing that to kind of our standards, and that like we're going to kind of get a better outcome based on the idea that we're like truly living by our process, which really kind of allows that to come to life. So essentially, like as we're doing it, there's definitely a vision about doing well and a vision about, a higher level of outcomes, when realistically being performance, based in your process is actually what gets you to that in my mind.
Yeah.
So
Preach. Preach. It's like this is something anytime I ever do a clinic, I talk about this outcome-based performance versus this outcome-based preparation, instead of like understanding that the performance usually equals the product, right? So the product is the performance, and then whatever is going to happen based on the product, right? So if I'm cultivating the right culture to try to get my organization to a place where they understand that, like, hey, if we do all of these things to the best of our ability and control all of the things that we can control, the outcome is going to be what the outcome is. We can't control whether or not a ref makes a bad call. We can't control sometimes whether or not a paintball bounces, but we can control all of these other factors, right? We can control all of this other stuff. And if we focus on the processes that we put in place, then the outcome will probably be good. Like it will probably be good if our process is good, right? If our process is good, because we've, again, experimented enough, we've gone through all the experimental process where we've had a hypothesis, we found our result, we've examined our results, retested, and now found, hey, here's our process for prep. Here's how we're going to prep for tournaments. We're going to do this for 2 hours. We're going to do this for 2 hours. And it's sometimes, obviously, that changes based on the layout, right? Yep. Like if there's 5 places to shoot things from, we're going to spend more than 2 hours probably shooting those shots, right? We haven't had one of those layouts in a while, but nonetheless, if the process is good and you practice to the performance versus to the outcome, you're probably going to have a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that. It's actually, that's what brings consistency, right? Like you're not always going to get the same outcomes, but essentially by doing that, it offers you a level of consistency. And then even the ability to kind of truly audit it, right? Because there's enough variability in paintball that you don't actually know what happened based on a small set of data, right? The variability in paintball is outrageous. It's more than almost any other sport. I always like to joke with the guys like that come into the paintball store that don't quite understand that. It's like if I played basketball, I would never beat LeBron James in the game of basketball. It's out of the realm of possibility. But if some newer player grabbed a paintball gun and went and played against, I'll say Oliver Lang, just because what that means for our culture, then realistically they could put a paintball on it. If he looked out at the wrong time, one curves around the bunker, whatever, the variability is just like completely outrageous. So, having more consistency of that process and being able to kind of audit it over a longer period of time adds more consistency. So.
Yeah, we talked about this last week with Ryan Brand, how the variabilities of gunfights change based on the circumstance, right? If we are up bodies, down bodies, up points, down points, clocks running out, the value of that gunfight changes, right? Like you may be a 50-50 if you're 3-3 with 8 minutes left. Maybe it's a 50-50 gunfight. If their bodies are all the same, you're both in the same bunker, okay, maybe that's a 50-50, right? Well, as soon as we shoot one of your guys, is it still, now does my guy have a 60-40? He probably does, right?
Well, I think that's all high level sports, right? So in Seattle right now, we're all currently Mariners fans, and we're all seeing that they're doing awesome out there. But I think the big part of it is like at the highest level, it's all about understanding situations of kind of what's actually happening and what kind of action should be taken during those situations and your tolerance for them. So same thing in paintball, but really it's all sports.
Sure. Yeah.
Tolerances. Yes. Excellent. So moving forward, obviously Cup is around the corner. And how often is Uprising getting together, by the way?
So we've been a little bit less active over the last couple weeks, but essentially moving forward, we'll play paintball every Sunday as a group until Cup, and then we'll actually have a couple 2 days of doing Saturday and Sunday. I think for most of the guys that can play every Saturday, they're going to do drills on Saturdays too. And then we still do a team meeting most Wednesdays, every other Wednesday at least, to kind of talk through some other stuff and just, get some FaceTime with the guys. So as much as possible. And again, for us, the connectivity of our group is the main thing. So, before the last event, we did a really good job of, having dinners together and kind of spending evenings talking through stuff and making it more than just about playing paintball and enjoying life with our close friends that, we have this very unique relationship with that I think is a little more truthful and direct than most people can have with their, people that they spend a lot of time with. So.
Love that.
I do too.
So let's talk
Nate Schroeder has entered the chat.
Yeah, I want to actually throw this out. This is our Seattle Uprising Soto Mojo edition jerseys. You can buy yours at Uprising Paintball. So they're kind of a throwback jersey to my youth and Seattle sports team. So
nice.
I love it.
What's that Seattle sports team?
It is Seattle Mariners currently, but this is actually Uprising Edition 1. So go Mariners. It seems like they're kind of crushing it and on the right track to have an awesome outcome. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I love it.
So one of the things I kind of mentioned it was culture, right? And you guys have this chant that you guys say before every match. What is it?
It's "Who's got my back?" And then everyone yells, "I got your back." It's usually led by Joel. He's kind of an emotional leader for us. It kind of goes along with our, in our pits, we're going to kind of play music, have a good time, make sure that we're kind of loose and ready to go, kind of based on getting some, clear heads and not being too caught up in what we're, kind of feeling and that kind of stuff. So it's really just based on the hey, everyone's all in on having each other's back and making sure we're supporting each other. And then essentially that leads into the conversations on the field, leading to more setting each other up for success, trying to help each other as much as we can, and kind of being able to clearly pass responsibilities and really not having anybody who is selfish, right? Whether it's about playtime or opportunity or that kind of stuff. We obviously, as all groups, you have guys that, want to play and want to contribute and want to do more, but really it's all about everyone kind of finding their little groove at events and doing the most they possibly can in their own little lane to help the group do better. So
sure.
It's all about just kind of supporting each other and having each other's back along the way. So
where did that start? That idea. So again, been watching you guys play for a really long time. When do you feel like kind of the culture of the group started to shift? I mean, was it when Jimmy came in?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it really, like the biggest part, like Jimmy helped by, giving kind of the high level kind of guidance and getting the right people. But I think it's that, when Tyler and I started, there's definitely a different level of structure that comes into it.
Mm-hmm.
And, Tyler was really big on auditing the process and kind of teaching us that stuff. And, he always kind of had this thing when he started, it's like, hey, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And so essentially by kind of leading to that theory, it kind of helped us raise our standards to, get better outcomes. I think that was really the starting point. And then again, kind of leading to new players, new people, kind of new leaders that kind of help establish that really, really helped. And then honestly, I think with that, it gives the other guys more bandwidth to focus on the main thing, right? It's, you don't have all of the players trying to figure that stuff out too. It becomes, hey, as long as they trust in us, we can help build better processes with their input. And then they just have to worry about, kind of actual game performance and having the right conversations. And again, a lot of it, like their ability to communicate with each other on the fly, talk through different stuff, like that's really what brings it to life. It's not us telling them what to do. It's, again, them bringing it all to life by being able to have great conversations ahead of time, and then us being able to kind of redistribute that information as needed to the perfect people in the perfect situation. So
awesome. So you guys brought in kind of a sports psychologist to help out with some of the conversational things, cultural things. Like, talk a little bit about the impact of that.
Yeah, Chelsea Brooks, she's been around helping us for this full season. It's another voice in the room that I think offers a level of grounding. Some of the guys use it more than others, but I think it also kind of helps us like work through some of our stuff, and then essentially just make sure that the guys like have some level of support so that, the moments don't feel too big. None of us are kind of, under too much pressure, while we're doing all this stuff. 'Cause it's supposed to be fun. I know for a lot of our guys, like we take it really seriously. We've done it for a very long time. We played a 10-man event like last weekend, which was like a for fun 10-man event. That was probably the first time our guys had played unserious paintball in a long time. And it's great to be part of the community. All the teams were there participating and stuff. But I think it also just like kind of helps the perspective of, hey, we're here to have fun. We want to be focused. And even at times it's like even understanding that like, hey, maybe you need to step out of this for a little bit of the tournament, right? Like maybe we only need to work 9 to 6 or 9 to 7, but like if we're trying to work 7 to 10 every day, then maybe we're doing too much and we're not focusing on the main thing, trying to do everything, right? So adding those kind of perspectives and, a little bit of grounding to the groups really helped. I know for me personally, and like Tyler, a lot of it's more like in between game stuff, making sure we're noticing little things that may slip past our awareness because we're both so tied into what's actually happening in those games and like what we need to do as coaches. So
that it's good to hear you say that. You said, hey, we try to have fun too, right? We're here to do work, but let's have fun doing it, right? That's why we do it. Obviously, that's something I've been trying to work on for the last couple of years, right? I get to an event and I'm in serious mode. I'm in work mode.
Mm-hmm.
And something Dynasty's been teaching me is, hey, let's have some fun. Let's have some fun. This is fun, right? So, if we're going to spend time away from our family, let's have a good time. So it's good to hear you say that. And I think the element you also talked about is, as a team, you try to spend as much time together as you can, not just at paintball, right? So that's vitally important as well to the culture and to everyone understanding each other, building those relationships, learning the communication tools, understanding how everybody ticks. And you're not going to find that out just spending every other weekend or a Sunday together playing paintball together. You need to learn that in a social environment outside of the realm of paintball.
For sure. Well, and I think part of that comes back to like learning everyone's reliability of character, right? There's some of the guys that over the years you get around and you see like small instances of them being awesome teammates or, being stand-up people. And then the more you're exposed to them, the more you realize whether it's under pressure situations or situations where they can choose to be selfish, you're just not actually getting the most out of those people. Where the more time you spend around each other, the more you see the way they handle their personal life, the more time you spend, just living day-to-day life situations with people, it can kind of affirm your bonds and like why we have so much respect for each other and why we choose to do this together. So
yeah, there it is. That's the gold.
I don't have any feedback on this. My group's a little different.
It's a whole different animal. I also think, I I had a very, I'll say, interesting conversation with someone in charge at our league at the last event. And that was kind of one of the things I had to reiterate with them is like, hey, our guys aren't a bunch of guys that get paid a bunch of money to play paintball. You know, they have a hard time being, you know, I don't want to say top tier professional athletes, but guys who, you know, physically can spend a full work week committed to training and that kind of stuff. So it's, you know, the reality is like in our sport, we're just at a small enough level where there's going to be a massive variation on that kind of ability to prepare, you know. So
that's a legitimate argument. You're playing the game, right? You're within the confines and the guardrails of the game, and you're playing the point game. So
yeah, well, I think you know there's a few points with that I'll speak to, and like the first one is, you know, sport versus entertainment. You know, for us it's sport, and you know, winning the war is the main thing in sport. You know, not necessarily every battle, but like getting on and moving on. You know, other parties would say, hey, it's important that we make paintball about entertainment. And you know, one of the guys brought it up to me that like realistically, if they wanted to play a certain way, it should not be them talking to us and coaxing us with words. It should be building incentivizing us to play a different way, or, you know, putting in some level of different rules or structure that incentivize a different outcome, not, you know, saying, hey, we need you to try to play this way, or like, hey, we'd prefer if you ran in every time and pushed the button, right? It needs to be kind of incentivized if that's how you want people to do it, specifically based on like, we're there to win and do the best we can, not to, you know, entertain the crowd necessarily. If that happens in the meantime, then obviously we love it and we want our fans to support us and stuff, but I think it really, for us as a group, it's about winning and doing well and kind of making the most of our, you know, energy and effort we put into it. So,
an intelligent and well thought out counter argument.
Yeah, and I told you after our match, I was like, that was smart. Like, I get it. We saw the whole morning, right? The whole morning brackets had basically 1 point games, right? I thought you did you played the smart game. That was smart, right? It's intelligent, right?
It's not just me, right? Like we have, you know, again, we have a handful of really smart dudes that talk through this stuff and, you know, have a pretty good understanding of who we are as people on a team, and, you know, even the way that, you know, it can mentally affect people, and kind of having the right lingo and the right kind of seeds to plant to make sure the guys know, like, here's why we're doing this. And again, using the lingo I said earlier of like, hey, Red Legion didn't want to play us more either, does add some level of, you know, does add some level of like, okay, it's not about us, like not trying to win. It's about us, you know, kind of giving ourselves the best opportunity to do better later. So,
yeah, no, and I love, and that's part of the game, right? Is you have to play it in a meaningful way, both on the field and in the pit, right? If you're going to allow that much time, it's not a trust thing. It's not, hey, we don't trust you guys. This is the intelligent move, right? It's like, do I go for it on 4th down, or do I kick the field goal, right? Like,
or do I take a knee, right? And let, you know,
or do I take a knee?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, so I totally get it. I understand it. And I also kind of agree with you. I do think that guy that had that bad conversation, he did come apologize.
We talked about it later. Yeah, I think we handled it well in the moment where, you know, as the insulator, I get to catch that and don't let the conversation escalate. Sure. You know, have a few ways to, I'll say, bring the conversation down. And then we just discuss it later, you know, like adults and, you know, and people that, you know, actually care about paintball. You know, I'm a lifer in this thing, so I have my own version of what it should look like, and, you know, what I think the process would be to get a different, you know, outcome from us, or a different game style that they're looking for. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm like, Mike and I were kind of talking about this the other night. Like, this is my 32nd year in paintball, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't plan to go anywhere soon. But at some point, like, I would like to see it be from a top-down perspective, just some changes made, right? Like, there to be some sort, like, more accountability to the purpose. If the purpose for the league is to make it entertaining, then your job as the league is to force the players, or as you said, incentivize the players to make it entertaining, right? And if you're going to do that, then you have to do it, right? You can't just talk about it. If our rules are set up in a way that teams can allow the clock to run out, and that's the smart thing to do, that's what teams are going to do. Smart teams are going to do that. You know, they're not going to go just keep hitting the buzzer or hanging toweling just to play more points, if that's not the smart thing, you know? Right.
Yeah, well, and I know, like, Nate was joking about it the last event, between kind of playing some like pretty short matches, you know, kind of blowing out the second two teams we played, and getting a bye, we were kind of talking about, it's like, man, if we win and we play some short matches, like we would have won this tournament with playing less paintball than pretty much everybody, which for us is kind of part of the template of like getting our best players to the end of the tournament as fresh as possible, where it's like, hey, we need our best guys to be ready to play more at the end, not necessarily the beginning, and like kind of cutting that tournament short is a way to kind of facilitate that in real time. So
yeah, as long as you make it.
Yeah, as long as well, let's be fair. Like, we've looked smart doing it a couple of different times now. You're not always going to look smart, right? Again, it's that process versus outcome based thing. I think for us being our second match in that situation, RDF beating Heat, knowing that we have two very winnable games the next day, like it aligns with our, process based thinking, right? Not our outcome based thinking.
Play those probabilities.
Yeah.
Play those
100%,
probabilities.
100%. Yeah, man.
Everybody's doing that at some, level. We're all playing probabilities. So
well, and I think it's also just like the consistent adaptation of how you should be playing situations, right? If we played a closer game in the first match, or ended up with a different outcome earlier, or maybe even win the first point against you guys, because we did have a couple points that were very close. One of them, one of them, J-Rab did superstar level player stuff. Got a couple quick kills. That's like, oh well, what do you do when the best dudes do things that the best dudes do?
I think you guys were beating us down the snake side. You shot both guys going that way, and J-Rab and Pasha just turned it.
Yep. And then, it's one of those things where even those instances going different probably change our thinking, right? Because we're always auditing that, right? We're kind of just trying to audit and manage that understanding as the games are going on. So every little instance in the tournament, your theory should be kind of shifting based on that win probability, and, of, again, not just the games, but of getting out of prelims and giving yourself chances at the end. So
totally. Yeah.
There it is.
And you mentioned something about keeping your guys kind of the starters kind of fresh until the end. Is that the methodology with kind of playing a more slow controlled game? Is that the purpose, to try to play a few less points? Like, you and I were standing next to each other during one of your matches, and the kid was in the snake, and I was like, go. And you go, no, he can sit right there for the rest of the match. I don't care.
I think part of this comes down to like understanding that like the general thought process that you guys may have might not align with what we have when it comes to playing the field.
Totally.
Right. And I think even that last layout, there was some real viability where you guys kind of made us pay for it. But essentially, if you never left that S2, you're in a much safer position than trying to go farther. Right. There's some level where as long as you were there plugging that snake and can head check the wire and just like keep the other team honest, they could not take the inside route and come shoot you. Like, it was almost impossible for that guy to come get bunkered out of that spot, where we knew if we get overextended against the better teams and we're not set up perfectly, our Dorito side players can now no longer protect the inside on our snake guy. Yeah. And now we're putting ourselves in situations where it seems like it's better, or like general theory would say that's better. But to our game style, it's actually not a better situation until we have a bigger advantage or a more clear outcome to win, like a more clear process to win. So I think it's all of those things combined. I don't necessarily think that we're always going to play super slow, right? I do think that, when it's that hot, you're in Texas or some of these really hot places, we're a bunch of guys from the Pacific Northwest where, we don't play in 100-degree weather all the time. So, making sure that those guys can get more spins, and then just being really tactful about how we kind of manage our roster and cycles so that, hey, if it's overtime and we have to get the best outcome possible, or like kind of throw our best hand out there, like, are we able to do that? Because at times you're not, right? Between guys that are worn out, or maybe someone played too many points in a row early, then essentially you may not be able to play your best five guys at the most important moment, or they might not be your best five guys in that moment because they're tired or worn out or mentally not in it, So.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to say that. I thought to me, it was like you were intentionally playing slow, like, but for some sort of tactical reason as much as what I said. Like, is it like Mike used to say all the time with the Hurricanes, like, hey, we want to play a little slower because we want to slow the game down. Like, we have young pros. We want them to be able to process all of the information and give them time to put it together, right? Which is a totally reasonable reason to play slow, right? Mm-hmm. You want to slow the game down. So if you have young guys, like, that's, again, we don't have young guys. Our guys, they want to process. They do process really fast. Dynasty is the same way. Like, they process really fast. They want to play up tempo so that you force the other team to have to make these very split-second decisions that maybe they're not prepared for. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think to like add on to that, I think a lot of it becomes like, we're not worried about necessarily getting behind the 8 ball a lot of times on the modern layouts, because there's not really a big win usually. Like the last layout was a great example where like, hey, if you got down the snake and got past the 50, unless the guys were down the Dorito side where you could just shoot them in the back, there really wasn't a kill to be had, right? So at times like that guy, kind of takes what is the advantage, when realistically, as long as we're prepared for it, we know the situations, we know how to react, then essentially it's not actually better for them. It might actually be worse, right? It's essentially, we just can't get caught up in these ideas that like, hey, because the general theory is they're farther down the field, it's better for them, that, we have to try to do the same thing. Specifically with the concept of, some of the teams that want to get overextended or put themselves in a situation where it's like, hey, if you want to come gunfight with our guys from close range, like we're not really afraid of that. Specifically if it's a situation where we know we can kind of create an advantage where it's like, us posted up on them or vice versa, as long as we know it's happening, like I think we feel like we can kind of play that way with anybody, as long as, some of the layouts don't dictate, hey, this guy gets here and it's a territories game, you're here, you win the game, or can completely give yourself a big enough advantage that you can't counter it. So
it's about finding that balance, right? Just because a bunker's forward doesn't mean that it's where you need to be at the time based off setup. And then it's also about pressure, right? You creating pressure or absorbing pressure. So, to your point, I get it. I see where you're coming from on that.
Well, and I think like the last layout, like I don't want to say we didn't really ever go past Snake 2. Like there's a few instances where we probably should have, and we could have done a better job taking advantage of it. But when guys were in the snake in front of us, Graham did an amazing job of playing against 2 or 3 guys in front of him without ever really giving himself up to give the other team the win. Right. So it's, one of those things where it's like, hey, as long as he's there playing smart paintball, and like, I wouldn't want to gunfight with Graham. I don't think anybody should choose to do that if, they're in those situations. So it kind of puts us in a really good spot to have a very intelligent person, then kind of communicate and control the game and work through the situations, and still be able to kind of play a spot that most of the time you're having someone maybe a little less experienced or someone who, doesn't quite fully understand the big picture of the theory, because it's more of the head down position. So.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Smart.
Well, smart. It makes sense. You're seeing this intellectual approach. We talk about this all the time, an academic approach to, getting your program, your crew, and pulling that performance out of them, and using your processes and methodologies to create that performance. Right. So yeah, I get it.
Let's talk a little bit about World Cup.
Yep.
So we've kind of talked about like sort of, how you guys are sort of shifted your training a little bit, refined processes. We haven't really talked much about accountability and expectation, right? So when we start thinking about kind of, you guys are like so close to getting to that final match, the last event. It was a really good match with Impact.
Yeah.
You guys are so close, right, to getting to that final match. Do expectations change now? Like we've now tasted the podium, or do you guys go into match with like, hey, here's the expectation, or are you setting micro goals as you go?
There's the big picture expectation that has totally shifted. I don't think it's different than what we thought it was going to be even 6 months ago, which was, hey, making Sundays and then being, top 4, giving ourselves an opportunity to win tournaments, right? And like, I don't think our expectation has initially shifted from that window in time. It's just become a real thing, or like it's become relevant to, apply that to ourselves. So I think that's a big part of it. But I do also think that like match to match, you still kind of have your micro goals, and like for us, that like the first big part of it is we need to beat the teams that we should beat, and also kind of maintain that margin, not give away games. I know at times, like previously in Tyler and I's tenure, we tried a little bit too hard to get fancy, and so we'd get away from doing what works amazing for us, right? Because we're trying to do more, kind of over scheming and things to take advantage of some of the stuff against some of the lower level teams, where for us, a lot of it's just being able to like, hey, can we adapt on the fly and make our adjustments, but not get away from what we know is our core values, and then handle the lower level teams consistently. And really, I don't want to say not let those games be close, but not let them be nail biters, not let them be things where it's like, hey, we're playing down to other team standards. And I think we've done a better job at that. And, last event, I think that kind of showed. And then also with the, mid to upper tier teams, it's like, hey, at this point, we kind of expect to be able to beat anybody. And then it becomes like, hey, can we get the guys to consistently believe that? So when it's time to go out there, like they're looking down there thinking like, hey, I don't want to say we have it in the bag, but it's a very real possibility that we win this match, even, shading to the idea of like, we're emotionally invested, like, hey, the outcome is more than likely going to be us winning if we can show up and perform to our own standards. So.
Love it.
Love that.
Managing expectations, right? It's such an overlooked thought process too, right? You've already proven that you can beat some of the best teams. You've done it, right? You've done it. So you've seen it. So there's that, that precedent set. So why not?
I think,
why not?
Yeah, and I think it also just takes like playing through those situations more and more and more, right? It's kind of knocking monkeys off your back when it comes down to. At first, it was winning some overtime games because we had some troubles with that. And now it's become, I think our guys fully believe in any overtime situation. If both teams are throwing their best pitch, we have a very good chance to win, right? Where previously we may not have had that belief, right? And then it's beating an X Factor on a Sunday, beating a Fit on a Sunday. Some of these situations, beating Heat and prelims, like some of these things that go, hey, we know we can play with the best teams now. We just have to fully believe it as we're moving forward because, the mental part of what we do is as important, if not more important than the kind of physical part of what we do as far as performance. So.
Absolutely. Positive self-talk is so important for athletes in any sport.
Yeah. And I want to give credit to our group because I know that's like one of the biggest, I don't want to say changes, but one of the biggest things we've really kind of grown into as we've all matured as people is just like not beating people up. I kind of have this thing where when bad things happen, we talk about it. And then like, if it gets brought up, like, hey, we talked about it. We don't have to like relive through all these negative situations. It doesn't need to be, each individual player giving someone a hard time. It's about, hey, if you have a problem, talk to me, talk to Tyler. We can have these conversations and kind of make sure that the right people are sending the right messages and then kind of hold each other accountable to that, but not having it be situations where people are getting beat up on or, this guy did something dumb. So we're going to call them dumb. Even in some of our conversations, based on game planning, I think our tone has changed when it comes down to some of the way, even the way that we disagree, and it's gone from being, hey, we're young, immature kids and saying, hey, that's a bad idea to, hey, I think the hole in the plan or, the missed part of this is this, this, and this, instead of it being, something where we're not communicating in a way that allows it to be about the outcome and the main things that we want to achieve. So.
Yeah. It's excellent. Especially from a sports psychology perspective, I've never understood why if I've got an adult male, athlete standing there in front of me and he's already upset by something that just happened, right? You can tell he's beat himself up by the performance. Last thing he needs is for me to knock him even lower. Because if I want to get better performance out of him, if I want him to prove, now I've just given myself another level that I have to lift him to before I get him to the next one where I needed him at. Mm-hmm. So, why do I want to reduce that expectations? Try to find that positive in it? Hey, right. I call it the compliment sandwich, right? Hey, you did this really well. I really need us to focus on this right now though, because we're struggling here. Hey, but don't forget we did this really well.
Yeah. Like in Pete Carroll's book, he talks about this kind of theory of if confidence is the most important part to performance, why would we ever do anything that kind of affects someone's confidence in a negative way?
There it
right?
is.
It is.
I read that book and like, it kind of changed the way I coached, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Like I was such a bully for such a long part of my coaching career, most of the time because I didn't know what to do with all those emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Like I didn't know how to pack those things correctly. I was young and stupid and I'm trying to I'm, very intense, right? And I've had to really work on that. But I would I would make a correction with a player and then I would allow 7-8 guys to, make the same correction thinking the more that player hears it, the more it will stick. Right. What I learned later is they stopped listening halfway through. Right. There was no need for all of that additional input. What I gave them in the way that I gave them, sometimes my delivery was bad, but the content was good. That was the first thing I had to fix. And then the second thing was it stops there, right? Nobody else has to go give that player correction. And I see it all the time. Even on our team, sometimes with the young guys, coach or I will Alexi or Max even will give them, direction and instruction. And then there's another player right behind and we have to tell them no, guys, we got it. Yeah, right. We got it. So Or sometimes we hear a player making the correction in the right way and we just turn around and walk away, right?
Well, yeah,
You got it, right?
I think there's also a difference of like when we're doing these things, right? Like right when they happen and we identify it's a problem, having the right voice, approach a situation in the right way is going to get you the highest outcome. And then I do also think it's very relevant though that for each, as the players on the field, as they're bringing this to life, like kind of maybe re-emphasizing these things or bringing them up in the correct situation is just amazing leadership language, right? So there is a time and place where on the field, whether it's right before someone's in this situation or kind of re-emphasizing some of the things that we may have had problems with or like the correct way to do things can be super, super valuable. But again, I think it's not based on beating each other up. It's, coaching people up and some of our leaders who have a better understanding of the big picture, being able to re-emphasize those things like in the right moments, not just in the situation of, hey, we all are kind of beating up on somebody. Because every time you mention it to somebody, if they've already kind of fully understand it, just like kind of as I don't want to say just another shot, right? But it's just like another body blow to somebody who may or may not already be kind of seeing themselves in a negative light or questioning their own performance. So
yeah,
don't
pick the dead horse.
Yeah,
right?
They don't need it.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, I don't want to talk. I don't want to shy away from the fact that there is at times need for intensity. There is needs.
I agree.
Right. I think you have to be intense. I think sometimes you have to shock that system, right? Because some players respond to that. I used to have players that would, they actually came up to me. This is a couple of years ago, but players would come up and it's like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm a dummy, right? So let me have it, right? And so it got to the point where I would coach one player, hey, look, this was good, but we need to focus on this. When that other player needed correction, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? What do you think? And he wanted that. He needed that for it to stick. So again, relationships, communication, but I think intensity is important a lot of times. I think you have to get intense. If we're stoic all the time, right, then, sometimes that can be a detriment in the fact that, okay, what coach obviously doesn't care.
Yeah.
Or, eventually.
I know for me in that conversation, there's kind of two parts there for Uprising that's really important. Tyler is an incredibly intense dude. And essentially that brings us a level of intensity that I think that a bunch of chill guys from the Pacific Northwest may have a hard time bringing out every day, right? And so Tyler brings that kind of intensity and focus where for me, in the same sense, but also kind of in outside of coaching and other teams and stuff, I've always kind of had the Phil Jackson Zen master approach of trying to do things calm, breathe through things. But I also know what that empowers me with is this ability to flip the script on people where it's like, hey, if you're always the calm guy, but I'm still very excitable, it means if I'm saying something in an aggressive manner or whatnot, there's two things that come from it. It's one, I care so much about our outcome and care so much about these people to help them. But two, it's that big kind of shocking switch because it's just not my natural personality. There it is. Right. I think it's very important at times once you've worked with people more, you're able to kind of bring that intensity to a different level, right? If it's my first time working with some D6 guys, they're elementary school kids, right? You got to kind of coax them into doing things and talk to them in a way that is a little more simple. If we're working with some of the mid-tier, national level teams, it becomes like, hey, I know you know a lot of this stuff. And if you don't, I'm going to give it to you once or twice in a, kind of constructive way. And then it becomes like, hey, what the hell, man? Why can't we figure this out? And even to a more extreme version at the pro level where the guys kind of know all this stuff. But even with that, there's a wildly variable level of experience where, if Nate messes up, him and I are going to have a way different conversation than somebody who is kind of one of the newer guys who may not even know they've, done something that's wrong, or there's a different version of process that might have got us to a different, thinking or action. So.
Yeah. Or an anecdotal example, perhaps you have a coach who doesn't curse a lot. And then he curses.
Yep.
Now you're like, whoa, right? It's something else we were talking about earlier. You've got those, meeting the players and, prior to the point, emphasizing the importance of what we need to focus on. And then maybe, reiterating and repurposing that, or rather reinforcing that as they come off the field. I think that's important. Something I've had to learn to do is because I'll have something and I'm ready to talk to a player about it, but I've got Kyle Berry or Yosh Rao or Ryan Greenspan already meeting him at the net, talking to him about it. Right. And so that's where I'm like, okay, that's covered. Right. Cause I'll listen. And it's like, nope, they're having the conversation, and you step off and you put your energy elsewhere. Right. So I get it.
Well, I know for us, some of our higher level guys, it's kind of become, they don't want to have the same conversations over and over again. Right. With some of the other players and stuff. And I know for me at times I have to play that role to reinforce things. But I know that's like one of the things we talked about. It's like, hey, Nate, all these kind of main guys, like we want you to be focused on kind of playing. The main focus of the guys who need the information, kind of developing the ideas further, not like kind of having to backtrack all the time to update people or guys that aren't paying attention or guys that may not quite fully grasp the concept of what we're doing. So
outstanding.
That's when we have problems, right? Is like if Justin has had to tell somebody like 4 or 5 times the same thing, that's when his level of frustration gets pretty high, right? And same with like Malloy. It's like, hey, I've told you that 5 times. Like, I go talk to coach, right? Like,
yeah,
it gets rough. So, and all of this stuff we're talking about from the communication, this is all part of that experiment, right? This is all like we're testing different ways to reach the players and to empower our leaders on our team to help bring those guys along to a certain extent, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you get to there, we got it, right? We understand. You've done your part. You've tried to be helpful. Now we understand we need to take that back from you. But we started to kind of talk about World Cup. It was asking about expectations and setting micro goals, and you kind of gave us that. Let's talk about your pool really quick. So you have Houston Heat, who you guys play really well against. You have Infamous, who looked great at the last event. You have New York Extreme, and then NRG Elite. There's got to be pretty high expectations there. Like when I look at your pool, you look like you could potentially be a 3-1, 4-0 team coming out of that. So
I think I like our pool. I think our guys are happy about it. I don't think there's any situation though where any pool would be something that we don't kind of see in that same light. I think specifically with the top teams being pulled out for the kind of champions round or whatnot, like I don't think there's any of the teams in the current pro league that we're afraid of playing, and essentially we wouldn't feel kind of the same way about. But I do think, again, a lot of it for us is just managing our process so we show up every single day as the best version of us, because that's really what it's about. It's not really about the other teams. It's about showing up as the best version of ourselves, and then kind of being able to adapt whatever the main goals and the focuses are moment to moment as that same kind of theory. So
control what you can control.
It's great.
There it is.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's all I got.
That's all I got, man. But in this hour and 16 minutes, what I love is how Dusty is so articulate that he's able to put things into. I mean, you were able to really compartmentalize a lot of those answers. They were so straightforward and clear, and I appreciate that, man. That was outstanding.
He packaged so much information into like these really short sentences. I was like,
it's like,
there's like 100 points in what he just said.
I'm just going to credit that too. I've pretty much spent my whole life talking about paintball. Big shout out to obviously my family's paintball company, DBS Doodlebug Sports, in the Pacific Northwest. Like I've also do some private coaching. Nate and I will generally run clinics for teams or individuals. So if that's something you're interested in, don't be afraid to hit me up. But I've spent a lot of time on task, kind of explaining this stuff to either my core guys, which can be a little bit more fun because it's a little bit more kind of going to swords with ideas, or then also being able to try to break it down to the newer guys so that we can kind of help pull people up faster. And I take a lot of pride that around DBS, like we do a pretty good job of bringing people along and having competitive teams and giving people a cool community of people that are like-minded that want to help people improve. So it's not just me, it's being exposed to some very intelligent people that I get to kind of have these conversations with, and then using our lower level people to remind myself of what's important to me and kind of what the main points are that we need to kind of talk about and refine. So yeah, appreciate you guys having me.
Outstanding. We appreciate you taking the time. We really do.
Yeah, man, we need to have you on more often.
Whenever, mostly available. So, and I pretty much live paintball.
I think if I ever have anything come up, Ryan, I think I know who your other co-host should be.
Yeah. He might be too nice, though.
It might be.
I don't know. I think one of the things that comes with being in the role that I'm in is it's easy to portray being nice when I think there's a level of truthfulness and directness that comes to doing what we do when it comes to coaching, and it doesn't have to be in a way that's abrasive. But I think that kind of pulls people out of being nice all the time, and when it's more about kind of getting the truth and being direct. So
yeah, I'm one of those people, like I just don't pull punches. I just I feel like it's much easier it may not be easier to hear, but it's like it's easier to get to the meat and potatoes if I just serve it to you as meat and potatoes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll add to that is I follow a lot of different coaches in pro sports, and in Seattle, Mike McDonald is the new Seahawks coach. You know, one of the things he talks about is like approaching it with like directness, love, and clarity, right? So, you know, it's not just doing it in a way that's, you know, kind of being abrasive. It's like, hey, can we approach this in a way that's as direct and clear as possible, but also done in a way that's like, hey, we care about each other, and like, you know, we care about the outcome and the process and stuff, and that's why we have to do it in a way that's so direct and clear. So
this is going to sound a little crazy, but I let the player determine how I'm going to deliver.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's also, you know, it's like at its core, it's a relationship-based business, right?
Bingo.
And essentially, like knowing the relationships you have with people and the, you know, way that you can meet them where they're at and what they actually need is a much better process than just trying to say, hey, I'm this person this way all the time.
What energy you're bringing is what energy I'm going to bring. Right.
I love it.
So yeah, to be clear, my delivery changes all the time based on who I'm talking to or about. It changes regularly. But it's still going to be the same words. I just my tone may be different. My face may look different, right? But the words are going to be the same more than likely, right? Like I just don't. It served me pretty well thus far to be very direct, and I'm going to keep doing that. I think, like literally on the Russians, I'm the nice coach.
That's what blows my mind.
I'm the nice coach. I'm the coach. Like when somebody comes, like that game, Justin Rabikov did that with you guys in the meeting. I'm giving him attaboys, right? Because that's like because the other coaches, they're just like, you know, they move right on to the next thing. And I'm like, it's okay to tell that guy that he just like he and Pavel just changed. Like they saved that point for us. Yeah. Like it's cool to say, hey, nice job, guys. Right. Yeah. Like, so I get to play that role, which is awesome because it's a role that I haven't really played much.
Yeah. I think one of the things though, too, that as coaches, we all kind of need to be mindful of is like, you say you approach things the same way, but I think it's also understanding people's own metaphors, right? Like for me, paintball is the metaphor for everything that I do in my life because it's like the main prominent thing. Right. But understanding whether someone's a sports person and going to understand the references based on other sporting events or, you know, coach speak or that kind of thing, or maybe they're more technical people who you have to use a different version of lingo based on other things. And like knowing everybody's metaphor and the way they communicate is the quickest way to get, you know, the information across. So,
no, but he was saying you should be my co-host on the show when he can't make it. So we're talking to literally like the layman of like not other usually professional coaches and players. So like we have to talk in a way that speaks to our audience, right? Like it's different if I'm talking to a player, right? Than how I'm speaking to our audience. So yeah.
And to answer your question, I would love to do that. So, you know, at any point, don't be afraid to be in contact. So
all right. Well, you're on the list.
Yeah, you might have to fight Rich Telford for it.
Yeah, Rich. I love Rich. Rich has great commentary. You know, I have a funny anecdote about Rich who mentioned to one of our old retired sales reps that if he didn't start doing yoga, he was going to punch him in the face. So, you know, one of the GI, one of the old gimpy GI sales rep that no longer does it. I don't want to say his name. And so, but he approached me, and you know, I did some private yoga lessons with him on a paintball field at 8 a.m. on a sunny day. You know, because Rich kind of forced him into that situation. So. By any means necessary, you know. By any means necessary.
I've known that guy you're talking about for so long. Like, I mean, I coached the Naughty Dogs in 2006. Right?
He's family, you know.
Yes, so. I worked with him at National Paintball, and he is just one of the sweetest guys.
Yeah,
one of the sweetest.
Our community and like myself and my brother, we would not be the same people without him. So. You know, there's a lot of people like that, a lot of kind of pillars of our community that we've taken, you know, little bits from, but he's definitely one of them. So,
and maybe the greatest storyteller ever.
Captivating.
Like listening to some of his stories from back in his football and other vocation, the fun vocation he did.
We don't need to get into it, but of course.
Yeah, I won't. So. Yeah,
we could probably do a whole episode on paintball players who are good storytellers.
Yes. Yeah. He is
the legend
we
of.
should do that. We should have an episode where certain players come on and tell one good story and just have like a row of them.
Yeah, that would be really good. All right. Let's get everybody out of here into bed.
Let's do it.
Dusty, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We truly appreciate you taking the time, sharing your insights. Very, very thoughtful.
Yes, sir.
Very thoughtful.
Have a nice night, guys.
Yes, sir. You do the same.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Man,
That's a
he's
good
so
show.
smart.
It's a good
Yeah,
show.
he's so smart.
He is, man. There's no doubt. Right.
Yeah. You can tell, like, with kind of the differences between sort of how he and Tyler sort of talk about
Oh, yeah.
sort of the game, how they are such a great team.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
You definitely see why that think tank is seeing success.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's impressive.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again to Coach Dusty Cort. Good luck to Seattle Uprising going into World Cup. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Jimmy Hickey. I know he mentioned Jimmy and Finlay hats. We're really blessed to have Jimmy as an owner in the league. Another very thoughtful guy. So excited he's here. Thank you to Major League Paintball, Major League Paintball Plus, Tom Cole, Kevin Fillers, Darren Cessna. Thank you all for joining us on episode 89 of the Coaches Show. I am Ryan Gray with Mike Bianca. As always, be responsible.